Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we've got a 2-game slate tonight in the NBA on Thursday night. Nate and I are going to be looking at the Bucks and the Celtics in this one. We are going to be switching up this format a little bit for you guys as we move forward. You're going to see we're going to be putting up a bunch more of the stuff we're talking about here on screen for you guys with some graphics, so you can check that out. We're just going to jump right into these games for you as well, not necessarily needing to read all of those lines, and a few more changes that you'll see coming up that we thought we'd start implementing as we get into these playoffs. We are going to also be reviewing the day, the picks before, from the night before rather. So we can start with that right here and just get into a little bit of how we did last night. We made a bunch of picks about a couple of different games, as well as a number of player props. We had Phoenix -5, that hit. We had the Grizzlies and the Clippers going over 233.5. Nate said, "Oh wait, Norman Powell's playing. Yeah, give me the over." And we promptly hit the over there. LeBron, Nate correctly called 24.5 points went over. Drew 16.5 points. I believe he had 17 with 11 minutes into the game, and then he finished with a career best, I believe, 51 points last night. Dude went off. Also a great call by Nate on that one. Bagley the third, not a great night. We had him over 24.5 points and rebounds combined. Did not make that at all or even close. But that was the only miss on the night, going 5 for 6, because Nate also correctly called Chris Paul going over 21.5 points and assists combined. So we are looking to stay hot for you guys on this one. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Boston and Milwaukee in this one. So Nate, give us a little bit of what we can expect in in Milwaukee tonight.
Yeah, it's tough to predict exactly how hard each team's going to be going, right? I mean, it is for the number one seed, which, by the way, the books completely expect Milwaukee to clinch, -2,000 for that to still be the number one seed here. So it's a question of, like, how much does Boston really want to go for this? Even if they get the win, it's very unlikely that Milwaukee loses enough games. So that's why, I mean, the first thought is I like the Bucks. I mean, the Celtics coming off a clear trap loss in Washington, so maybe they were looking ahead to this one. But you haven't seen enough from Boston to think that they can beat a Bucks team that's 26-4 in their last 30 games, right? Even with the Bucks on a back-to-back, -2 or 2.5 right now at home seems solid. I mean, they're 9-2 on back-to-backs this season. Actually shoot better from three, hitting 16.5, actually have better three-point defense, holding opponents to 10 threes at 31%. That is huge. Holding opponents to 109 points per game, which has led to 8-3 to the under, which leads me to steer away from the total, which, certainly these teams do go over when they play in the regular season. They don't go over in the playoffs, though, and that's why you're kind of like, how much is this game going to have a playoff atmosphere? The Celtics last season held Tatum out in the equivalent of this game. It seems like they're going to have everybody. It seems like the Bucks are going to have everybody, and it's going to be, full balls to the wall here in terms of defensive presence. But, I mean, Rob Williams is on a minutes limit. Grant Williams is dealing with an illness that might keep him out. It really just leaves Al Horford to deal with Giannis, who's just on an incredible tear in his last 12, scoring 32.5 points in 31 minutes per game at home. Like, just more than these are Wilt numbers he's putting up. And the Bucks, just the pace they play at as well, it leads me to think about, well, I don't necessarily trust over for the game because of that playoff vibe. Like, maybe it slows down in the fourth quarter, but both these teams are playing incredibly fast in the first. And since the All-Star break, Bucks 106 pace in the first quarter, a 124 offensive rating. Boston 101.5 pace for the first, and a 120 offensive rating. This is compared to like 96, 97 that Boston plays at for the entire game. So 60.5 points for the first quarter is actually what I'm even more confident about than the Bucks winning this game, is that, Giannis sets the tone early. The Bucks stay hot from last night when, like you said, Drew drops 17 in like 10 minutes and they score 150. And they just stay hot, and the Celtics come along a little bit as they try to bounce back from their rough showing in Washington.
Yeah, that was difficult and not unwanted, though, as that really helped the futures bet that we put down right around the All-Star break for Milwaukee to overtake Boston and get that one seed, and Boston really helped them out with that bad loss. I would say the pace is huge. Is everything in this one. You say the thing you like first here. You're talking about points in the first quarter, 60.5, and that definitely has been the case majorly for the Bucks. No matter really, especially when they're playing at home. I should say it doesn't matter. It's not that it doesn't matter where they're playing. They are much a bit faster at home and playing that well, and that's where a number of their games have been as of before that road trip that they just came home from. They did have 3 in a row there and played super fast, dropping about 128 points per game in those 3. Granted, it was against some really bad defenses, but I don't really know what you want to do with this Boston defense when it plays Milwaukee. I mean, it's been really good in the last roughly like 10 games, and I think you've seen Boston games be a little bit lower scoring than you were seeing at the beginning of the season. Obviously, that's combined with a bit of the regression in 3-point shooting that they saw over that time as well. But the pace is still there, and the defense, while it's good in a lot of ways with Rob Will back, it's much better. Let's just be very clear. It's directly correlated to Rob Will being in there. This is a team that they're going to come up against that can still get its buckets down low, more so because it's got at least 2 or 3 guys that are around the same size as Rob Will that are going to be tumbling at him. But you always mention Papa Al Horford in these instances as well, and obviously he's likely to get the start there, and then we'll see what happens from there in terms of obviously then Rob Will and Grant Williams would be major blows if they're not there for that down low presence, but probably just adds to this being a little bit higher scoring, and at least in the first quarter, I think you can expect them both to come out ripping and roaring, even if it is more of what you would consider a playoff atmosphere. It still is a March technically, right? It's the 30th, and so there's still the likelihood that they're not necessarily playing quite as hard on defense, and even if they are, they're both just coming out so focused that you can probably expect a bunch of threes to go in early, and that's usually the MO between these two teams. Play at a fast pace, get some pretty good shots from deep, and that gets you to that over. So I mean, I'm not scared of the 236 over, to be honest with you, either. I think even at home for this Bucks team going over, it feels right, because I don't think they're necessarily going to be able to stop this Boston team quite as much on the second leg of a back-to-back for Milwaukee as well, like we talked about, and probably the likelihood to go over in those situations for them where they've got a little bit more of an eye for the basket and maybe a little bit less legs on defense to be able to run with this team as well. So if Boston's going to keep it that fast, I like it at that pick. But let's move on to one more pick that we like for this one, and I think that's just the Bucks to cover 2.5 at this point in a game where, once again, if Robert Williams III and or Grant Williams don't play, I mean, how much do you think that impacts this?
Oh, hugely. And it's a question of the Celtics really saving Rob Williams for the playoffs, because, I mean, how much do you care about this game if you're not going to be able to catch the Bucks either way? And we saw last year that they just held out Tatum entirely when he could have absolutely played in that game in April against the Bucks. And yeah, I mean, Rob hasn't played just over 20 minutes once since coming back. He's averaging 17 minutes. He struggled in his last one out there. 5 points per game, 7 rebounds per game. He went scoreless with a negative 14 rating in Washington here. Washington shot 66% inside the arc, and that's obviously very concerning. The free throw discrepancy is something you look at for the Bucks. They still shoot 28 free throws a game on back-to-backs and hold opponents under 20. Celtics never get to the line. But yeah, the 3-point shooting is what has allowed Boston to hang in these games and what has forced all of them over really in the regular season. They're hitting about 18 threes at 38% in these recent ones to hang with the Bucks, who are scoring 125 at home their last 3 against the Celtics. So certainly some over numbers to look at, but I look at the road home splits for the Celtics since the start of January. They're 13-10 on the road. Everything is worse. Defense is worse. Scoring is worse. 3-point percentage, 3 points worse. And in their last 9 road games in particular, only 34% from deep in those ones. So if the Bucks, this year kind of changing it up to both defend the 3-point line and the interior. They've shown the ability to do that on back-to-backs, partially because Bud has done a good job, with rest and management and everything. And while those guys, Drew and Giannis, did carry a relatively big load yesterday against Indy, I mean, it's not really that physical of a game. I mean, facing a team of rookies in the Pacers there, I think they will be up for this game in terms of one more. And yeah, I'm not betting against Giannis right now. I feel fine betting against the Celtics on the road because they're just still kind of mired in this malaise. Like, just because they beat the Kings once, I don't think we can trust them After coming home and smashing the Pacers and Spurs, like I still don't trust this team to finish the regular season strong. There's definitely something going on with them.
It does seem that way. And some of the chatter in Boston, if I'm not mistaken, which God help you if you have to listen to Boston radio sometimes, Boston Sports Radio. No, just kidding. But if you are, you're probably hearing a lot of guys mad at Joe Mazzulla right now, which I don't know how that turn happened so quickly. But I don't know if it's necessarily him, quote unquote, losing the locker room. There's been somewhat of a seemingly lack of effort on defense. I will say that. I know their rating has been a bit higher than, especially since Robert Williams came back, and that's fine. He erases a lot of the deficiencies, but the effort didn't seem to quite be there against the Wizards for sure. And then you talk about the 3-point shooting variance for this team, potentially, coming back to haunt them a bit if they're not going to be able to score other ways. At the same time, we saw Jason Tatum sort of start to attack a bit more in the playoffs before he got to the finals anyway, in a way that really helped them, even though he had some up and down games. I think that is a huge part of this is, are you attacking for the Celtics versus just not necessarily settling, but relying on 3-pointers to carry you. And this one, I think the Bucks just come ready to play. I don't think they're too concerned with that game last night. And in this one, they're going to be rearing to go. So 2.5 feels right. And that is all the time we have for you in this one. Make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Also got another game video up since there's 2 tonight, and our player props for you. So until we see you next, happy betting.